The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clanged against the concrete floor of my garage. Through the thin walls, I heard Neera's voice cut through the evening air like a blade through butter. "Pierce, I need you to spend the night at your parents' place. My boss is coming over for dinner." I wiped my hands on an old rag and stepped out from under the hood of Mrs. Henderson's ancient Toyota. Neera stood in the doorway connecting our garage to the kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she meant business. Her gray pantsuit looked fresh, despite the long day at Vossen Architecture, where she'd been climbing the ladder faster than a cat up a tree. "Your boss?" I asked, though I already knew which boss she meant. Rhett Vossen, the firm's golden boy who drove a BMW that cost more than I made in 2 years, running my auto repair shop. "Yes, Rhett. We have an important project to discuss, the Henderson Mall renovation." She crossed her arms, and I noticed she'd changed into a different blouse, something silky and blue that I hadn't seen before. I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch between us like taffy. 20 years of marriage had taught me when to push and when to wait. This felt like a waiting moment. "All right," I said finally. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. I'll probably be working late, so don't wait up." "Sure thing." I grabbed my keys from the workbench. "I'll just grab a few things from upstairs." "Actually, you don't need to go upstairs. Just take what you need from down here." Now that was interesting. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind started turning over like an engine on a cold morning. "Okay. I'll head out in a few minutes." She disappeared back into the house, and I heard her heels clicking across the kitchen floor. I waited until the sound faded, then quietly made my way to the side window that looked out onto our driveway. Sure enough, Neera was checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, touching up her lipstick. I'd been fixing cars for 15 years, and you learn to spot problems before they become disasters. The way Neera had been acting lately, the late nights, the new clothes, the sudden interest in networking events, it all added up to something I didn't want to think about too hard. But tonight, I was going to think about it plenty. I climbed into my pickup truck and backed out of the driveway, making sure to wave at Neera through the kitchen window. She waved back with a smile that looked about as genuine as a $3 bill. Instead of turning left toward my parents' house on Maple Street, I turned right and headed across town to Elmwood Avenue, where Neera's parents lived in their pristine colonial with the perfect lawn and the security cameras they'd installed after someone stole their garden gnomes last spring. I parked under the streetlight directly in front of their house and walked up the brick pathway. The porch light flickered on before I reached the door, and I could see movement through the frosted glass panels. Mr. Danning opened the door wearing his usual cardigan and confused expression. "Pierce? What are you doing here?" "Evening, Mr. Danning. Mind if I come in?" "Well, of course, but—" That's when I saw her. Neera stood behind her father in the hallway, cell phone pressed to her ear, her face pale as fresh snow. Our eyes met across the distance, and I watched her mouth form a small O of surprise. "Pierce," she said into the phone. "I'll have to call you back." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Mrs. Danning appeared from the living room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What a lovely surprise," she said, though her voice carried that forced cheerfulness she used when she was trying to smooth over awkward situations. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my spare house key, the one I kept on my truck keychain. I placed it carefully on the small table by the door, right next to Mrs. Danning's collection of ceramic cats. "I won't be needing this anymore," I said. "I'm done leaving my own house on command." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. Mr. Danning cleared his throat, and Mrs. Danning's dish towel stopped moving. Neera found her voice first. "Pierce, what are you talking about? I just asked you to give us some space for an important business meeting." "Right, business." I looked at her phone, still clutched in her manicured fingers. "Who were you calling just now?" I was ordering dinner for the meeting. From Chez Laurent, the place that takes reservations 3 weeks in advance. Her cheeks flushed pink. I don't see why that matters. It matters because Chez Laurent doesn't deliver, and their number is programmed in your phone under R for restaurant, not under whatever name just appeared on your screen when I walked in. Mr. Danning shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this calmly. Nothing to discuss, I said. I just wanted to let you folks know that I won't be staying here tonight, or any other night when my wife decides she needs the house to herself. I turned to go, then paused with my hand on the doorknob. Oh, and Neera? Next time you want to have a private business meeting, you might want to remember that I installed our home security system, the one that backs up to the cloud account that I pay for. I left them standing there in their perfect hallway with their perfect shocked expressions and drove home. But I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, cutting through the Hendersons' backyard to the alley behind our house. From there, I had a clear view of our driveway and the kitchen window. At exactly 8:30, a silver BMW pulled into my spot next to the garage. Rhett Vossen climbed out, straightened his tie, and walked up to my front door like he owned the place. Neera answered before he could knock. I watched them embrace through the window, watched her lead him into what used to be our kitchen, watched the lights dim as they moved deeper into what used to be our house. Then, I walked back to my truck and drove to Mickey's bar on Industrial Avenue, where the beer was cold and nobody asked questions about why a man might need a drink on a Tuesday night. I woke up Wednesday morning with a headache and a plan. The headache came from Mickey's beer. The plan came from 20 years of fixing things that other people had broken. The first step was documentation. I sat in my truck outside the 24-hour diner on Route 9 and pulled out my laptop. The home security app loaded slowly on my phone's hotspot, but eventually the login screen appeared. Pierce, Eldro, Home Security. Password, Neera 1985. She'd chosen her birth year, and I'd never changed it. The system stored 30 days of footage automatically, longer if you paid for premium storage. I'd been paying for premium storage since the day I installed the cameras 3 years ago, after our neighbor's house got broken into. I started with yesterday's footage and worked backward. The timestamp showed Rhett's BMW entering our driveway at 8:31 p.m. The garage camera caught him using the keypad code, the code only Neera and I were supposed to know. The kitchen camera showed them talking, laughing, touching each other's hands across our dining room table. But that was just Tuesday. I kept scrolling. Monday night, BMW in the driveway from 7:15 p.m. to 11:47 p.m. Sunday afternoon, BMW in the driveway from 2:30 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. Friday night, BMW in the driveway from 6:00 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. Saturday. He'd stayed overnight, in my house, in my bed probably. I copied everything to a USB drive, then uploaded it to my personal cloud storage account, the one Neera didn't know about. By the time I finished, the sun was coming up, and the diner was starting to fill with the morning crowd. I ordered coffee and eggs and sat in a corner booth, thinking about my next move. My phone buzzed, text message from Neera. "Where are you? We need to talk." I typed back, "At work. Busy day ahead." Her response came immediately. "This is serious, Pierce. Come home." "Can't. Mrs. Henderson's Toyota won't fix itself." I turned off my phone and drove to my shop. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings helped clear my head. I had 3 cars waiting for repairs and a business to run. But first, I had some research to do. I called my bank and requested statements for all joint accounts going back 6 months. Then I called my lawyer, Jim Morrison. Not the rock star, just a guy who'd helped me set up my business and occasionally handled small legal matters. "Pierce, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "I need to know about asset protection, Jim. Hypothetically speaking, if someone was planning to leave a marriage, what would be the smartest way to protect themselves financially?" There was a pause. "This is hypothetical?" "For now." "Well, hypothetically, the first step would be to document everything. Joint accounts, shared assets, property ownership. Then you'd want to secure any accounts where you're the primary holder. Legally, of course. Of course. And Pierce? If this stops being hypothetical, call me immediately. I spent the rest of the morning under the hood of Mrs. Henderson's Toyota, but my mind was working on a different kind of problem. By lunchtime, I had a list of everything Neera and I owned together, and everything I owned separately. The house was mine. I'd bought it 2 years before we got married, and I'd never added her name to the deed. The joint checking account had about $3,000 in it. The savings account had $12,000. My business accounts were separate, and so was my retirement fund. But Neera had her own accounts too, and I had no idea how much money she'd been moving around lately. My phone rang. Mason Eldro, my younger brother. "Hey, Pierce, heard you might be having some trouble at home." Mason and I hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since the argument about him borrowing money from our parents again. But news traveled fast in a town this size. "Where'd you hear that?" "Mickey's bar. You were apparently pretty talkative last night." I didn't remember talking to anyone at Mickey's, but then again, I didn't remember much after the 4th beer. "It's complicated," I said. "Complicated how? Like, lawyer complicated or just regular complicated?" "Both, maybe." "Want to grab lunch? I might have some information you'd find interesting." We met at Sal's Deli on Main Street. Mason looked better than he had in years, clean-shaven, decent clothes, like he'd finally gotten his life together. He ordered a sandwich and got straight to the point. "I've been doing some work for Hartley Investigations," he said. "Private detective stuff, background checks, surveillance, that kind of thing." "Since when?" "Since I got tired of being broke all the time. Turns out I'm pretty good at finding out things people don't want found out." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Rhett Vosin sitting in a restaurant booth across from a woman who wasn't Neera. They were holding hands across the table. "When was this taken?" "Last Thursday, same day your wife told you she was working late on the Henderson Mall project." I studied the photo. The woman looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Her name is Jenna Groves," Mason continued. "She works in HR at Vosin Architecture. Also happens to be your wife's best friend from college." The pieces started falling into place like parts in a well-organized toolbox. "How long have you been watching him?" 2 weeks. I was hired by his wife's divorce attorney." "His wife knows?" "His wife's been building a case for months. Turns out your wife isn't his first affair." Mason slid a manila envelope across the table. "Copies of everything I've collected. Consider it a brotherly favor." I opened the envelope and found photographs, bank records, hotel receipts, and a timeline that made my stomach turn. Rhett had been planning this for months, maybe longer, and Neera had been helping him every step of the way. "There's something else," Mason said. "Something you're not going to like." "What now?" "Your wife's been moving money, small amounts but regular, into an account that's not in her name." "Whose name?" "Still working on that." "But Pierce, whatever you're planning to do about this, you better do it fast. Because I think they're planning to do something first." I spent Wednesday afternoon preparing for war, not the kind of war that involved lawyers and court dates. I wasn't ready for that yet. This was the kind of war that required patience, planning, and perfect timing. First, I drove to the bank and transferred all the money from our joint savings account into my personal business account. $12,047. I left exactly $1 in the joint account, just enough to keep it open. Then I went to the courthouse and filed a notarized inventory of all personal property in our house. Every piece of furniture I'd bought, every appliance, every tool in my garage. The filing cost $25 and created a legal record that would be very difficult for anyone to dispute later. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with calls and texts from Neera, but I ignored them. Whatever she had to say could wait until I was ready to hear it. At 5 o'clock, I drove home for the first time since Tuesday night. Neera's car was in the driveway, and I could see her silhouette moving around in the kitchen. I parked on the street instead of pulling into the garage. She met me at the front door before I could get my key out. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "I've been calling you all day. Working. Some of us still have jobs that require showing up." Her face flushed. "That's not fair, Pierce. You know how important my career is." "Right. Your career." I pushed past her into the hallway. "How's the Henderson Mall project coming along?" "Fine. Good. We're making progress." "Funny thing about that project," I said, hanging my jacket on the hook by the door. "I called Henderson Development this morning to ask about the timeline. They told me the renovation was canceled 3 weeks ago. Budget cuts." Neera's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. They must be mistaken." "Must be." I walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. "What's for dinner?" "I thought we could order something. Chinese, maybe." "Sure, but let's eat in the dining room tonight. I want to try out the new camera angle." "What camera angle?" I smiled and pulled out my phone, opening the security app. "The one that shows our dining room table. Great view of anyone who might be sitting there. Want to see?" I held up the phone so she could see the screen. The camera feed showed our empty dining room, but the timestamp in the corner proved the system was recording everything. "Pierce, what are you doing?" "Just checking to make sure everything's working properly. You never know when you might need to review old footage. For security purposes." She stared at the phone screen, and I watched the color drain from her face as she realized what I was telling her. "How long have you been watching?" she whispered. "Long enough." We stood there in our kitchen, 20 years of marriage hanging between us like a loaded gun. Finally, she broke the silence. "It's not what you think." "Really? What do I think, Neera?" "You think I'm having an affair with Rhett." "Are you?" Another long pause. "It's complicated." "No, it's not. It's actually pretty simple. Either you are or you aren't." She sat down at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "I didn't plan for this to happen. But it did happen. Yes. For how long? 2 months. Maybe 3. Try 6 months, Neera. I've got footage going back to October." Her head snapped up. "You've been spying on me for 6 months?" "I've been protecting my home for 6 months. There's a difference." She stood up and started pacing around the kitchen. "This is crazy, Pierce. You can't just spy on people." "I can spy on my own house, especially when my wife is bringing her boyfriend over for sleepovers. He's not my boyfriend. It's not like that." "What's it like then?" She stopped pacing and looked at me with something that might have been pity. "It's like being with someone who understands my ambitions, someone who doesn't think I should be satisfied with fixing cars and living in this neighborhood for the rest of my life." That stung more than I expected it to. "This neighborhood was good enough for you when you married me." "I was 22, Pierce. I didn't know what I wanted then." "And now you do?" "Yes. I want more than this." I nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But you should have told me that before you started working on your exit strategy." "What exit strategy?" I pulled out my phone again and showed her the bank app. The joint savings account that used to have $12,000 in it. Want to guess how much is in there now? She grabbed for the phone, but I pulled it away. $1, Neera. Just enough to keep it open so you can't claim I closed it without your permission." "You can't do that. That's my money too." "Was your money. Now it's safely tucked away where you can't transfer it to whatever secret account you've been building." Her face went white. "How did you know about the secret account? Lucky guess, but thanks for confirming it." She sank back into her chair. "Pierce, please. We can work this out." "Can we? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already worked it out. You and Rhett have been planning this for months, haven't you?" "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me." She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Rhett offered me a partnership in the firm. A real partnership. not just a senior associate position. But there were conditions. What kind of conditions? He said the other partners would never accept a married woman as an equal. Too many complications, too many divided loyalties. So he asked you to get divorced. He asked me to choose between my marriage and my career. And you chose your career. I chose my future. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the driveway where Rhett's BMW had been parked so many nights. Did you ever think about talking to me first? Maybe discussing it like married people do? Would you have understood? I guess we'll never know now. My phone buzzed with a text message. Mason. Package delivered to Mrs. V. She says thank you. I smiled. While Neera and I had been having our heart-to-heart, Mason had been delivering copies of all his surveillance photos to Rhett's wife, along with the hotel receipts, the restaurant bills, and a detailed timeline of her husband's activities over the past month. Pierce? Neera was looking at me with concern. Who was that? Just business. What kind of business? The kind that involves making sure everyone has all the information they need to make informed decisions. Before she could ask what I meant, my phone rang. Unknown number. Pierce Eldro. Mr. Eldro, this is Patricia Voisin. I believe you know my husband. I looked at Neera, whose face had gone completely pale. Yes, ma'am. I believe I do. I was wondering if we could meet tomorrow morning. I have some information that might be useful to both of us. I'd be happy to meet with you, Mrs. Voisin. Excellent. Do you know the Coffee Bean on Elm Street? 10 o'clock? I'll be there. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Neera was staring at me with a mixture of fear and anger. What did you do, Pierce? Nothing illegal. Nothing unethical. Nothing you wouldn't have done if you'd thought of it first. You sent those photos to Patricia? I didn't send anything to anyone, but I can't control what other people choose to share. She stood up so fast her chair fell over backward. You bastard. You have no idea what you've just done. Sure I do. I've leveled the playing field. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's just getting started. Thursday morning brought rain and revelations. I arrived at the Coffee Bean 10 minutes early and chose a corner table where I could see the entire restaurant. Patricia Voisin walked in at exactly 10 o'clock, and I recognized her immediately from the society page photos that occasionally appeared in our local newspaper. She was elegant in the way that money makes possible. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect posture. But there was something sharp in her eyes that suggested she hadn't gotten where she was by being naive about human nature. Mr. Eldro? She extended a manicured hand. Patricia Voisin, thank you for meeting with me. Call me Pierce, and thank you for the invitation. She ordered coffee, black, and got straight to business. I assume you know why I wanted to speak with you. I have a pretty good idea. My husband has been having affairs for 7 years. Your wife is simply the latest in a long series of poor decisions on his part. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. I found myself impressed by her composure. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. I stopped being sorry about Rhett's behavior a long time ago. Now I'm simply focused on protecting my interests. She opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I've been building a case for quite some time. The photographs your brother provided were very helpful, but they're just the latest addition to a rather extensive collection. What kind of collection? Financial records, mostly. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. Did you know that Rhett has been using company funds to pay for his romantic adventures? I didn't know that, but I kept my expression neutral. That sounds like something the other partners would be interested in hearing about. Oh, they will be. Tomorrow morning, in fact. I've called a meeting of the board of directors. She slid the folder across the table. There's something else you should know. Your wife has been helping Rhett embezzle money from the firm. That hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? Fake invoices for the Henderson Mall project. The one that was canceled 3 weeks ago, remember? Except the invoices kept coming, and the payments kept going out. Into an account that your wife helped him set up. I opened the folder and found bank statements, canceled checks, and copies of invoices for work that was never performed. The amounts weren't huge, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, but they added up to nearly $50,000 over 6 months. How did you get all this? I have my sources, and before you ask, everything here was obtained legally. Rhett was careless about leaving papers in his home office, and as his wife, I had every right to review our household finances. Why are you showing me this? Because tomorrow morning, when I present this information to the board, they're going to ask questions about your wife's involvement. I thought you should be prepared. I closed the folder and looked at Patricia Vossen with new respect. She'd been planning this for months, maybe years, building her case piece by piece while her husband thought he was getting away with everything. What do you want from me? Nothing. I'm simply providing information that I thought you might find useful. What you do with it is entirely up to you. She finished her coffee and stood to leave. One more thing, Pierce. Your wife is smarter than Rhett gives her credit for. She's been documenting everything too. If I were you, I'd be very careful about my next moves. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, studying the papers she'd given me. The pattern was clear. Rhett and Neera had been planning their exit strategy for months. The fake invoices, the secret account, the partnership offer. It was all connected. But Patricia was right about something else. Neera was smart, and she wouldn't have gotten involved in something like this without protecting herself, which meant she probably had evidence that could implicate me too, even though I'd had nothing to do with any of it. I called Jim Morrison from the parking lot. Jim, it's Pierce. I need to see you today. This stopped being hypothetical. How stopped? Embezzlement, fraud, and probably a few other things I haven't thought of yet. Come to my office, now. Jim's office was in a converted Victorian house on the edge of downtown. His secretary was out to lunch, so he made coffee himself while I explained everything that had happened since Tuesday night. Jesus, Pierce, this is a mess. How big a mess? Potentially huge. If your wife was involved in embezzling company funds, and if they can prove you knew about it, you could be facing criminal charges. But I didn't know about it. Can you prove that? I thought about it. The security cameras in my house would show that I wasn't present for most of their meetings, and my bank records would show that I never received any of the stolen money. That's a start. But Pierce, you need to be very careful here. If this goes public, it's going to destroy a lot of lives. It's already destroying my life. I know. But there might be a way to minimize the damage. How? Cooperation. If you can provide evidence that helps the authorities recover the stolen money, they might be willing to work with you. What kind of evidence? The security footage you mentioned, financial records, anything that shows the timeline of when this started and who was involved. I left Jim's office with a plan and a sick feeling in my stomach. When I got home, Neera's car wasn't in the driveway. I went inside and found a note on the kitchen table. Pierce, I'm staying at my parents' house until we can figure this out. Please don't try to contact me until you're ready to be reasonable. N. Reasonable. That was rich, coming from someone who'd been embezzling money and planning to leave her husband for her boss. I spent the rest of the afternoon copying every piece of security footage from the past 6 months onto multiple USB drives. Then I went through our home office and photographed every document that might be relevant. Bank statements, credit card bills, anything with Neera's name on it. By evening, I had enough evidence to fill a small filing cabinet, but I also had something else. A plan for making sure that when this whole thing exploded, I wouldn't be the only one standing in the blast radius. I called Mason and asked him to meet me at Mickey's bar. We needed to talk about the endgame. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you think about new beginnings. I was thinking about endings instead. I got to my shop early and spent an hour organizing my thoughts and my evidence. At 9 o'clock, I called Detective Ray Kowalski at the police station. Ray and I had gone to high school together, and he'd brought his patrol car to my shop for oil changes ever since I'd opened the business. Ray, it's Pierce Eldro. I need to report a crime. What kind of crime? Embezzlement, fraud, maybe conspiracy. There was a pause. Pierce, are you in trouble? Not the kind you're thinking of, but I've got information about some people who are. Come down to the station. Bring whatever evidence you have. At the same time I was talking to Ray, Patricia Vossen was presenting her evidence to the board of directors at Vossen Architecture. By 10:30, Rhett had been suspended pending investigation. By 11 o'clock, the firm's attorneys had frozen all company accounts and begun an internal audit. And at 11:15, my phone started ringing. Pierce, what did you do? Neera's voice was shaky, panicked. I did what any honest citizen would do. I reported a crime. You don't understand. This is going to ruin everything. Everything was already ruined, Neera. I'm just making sure the blame gets distributed fairly. The police want to talk to me. I imagine they do. Pierce, please, I need your help. Funny. I needed your help too, about 6 months ago. Remember when I asked you what was wrong, why you were working so late, why you seemed so distant? That would have been a good time to ask for help. I can't go to prison. Then you should have thought of that before you helped your boyfriend steal $50,000. The line went quiet, except for the sound of her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. If I go down for this, Pierce, I'm taking you with me. How do you figure that? I have documentation showing that you knew about the Henderson Mall invoices, emails, text messages, recorded phone calls. The police are going to think you were part of it from the beginning. Except I wasn't part of it. And I've got 6 months of security footage proving that I was never present when you and Rhett were planning your little scheme. Security footage can be edited. Not the kind I have. Time-stamped, encrypted, backed up to multiple cloud servers. Try explaining that to a jury. She hung up without saying goodbye. I spent the rest of Friday at the police station, going through my evidence with Ray and a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit. They were particularly interested in the security footage, which clearly showed Rhett and Neera meeting in my house on dozens of occasions, often with laptops and paperwork spread across my dining room table. This is good stuff, Pierce, Ray said as we reviewed the timeline. Really good. But you know this is going to get ugly, right? It's already ugly. I mean legally ugly. Your wife's attorney is going to claim you were part of the conspiracy. They're going to say you provided the location for the meetings, that you knew what was happening and chose not to report it. Let them try. I've got documentation showing exactly when I discovered what was going on and exactly when I reported it. Plus, I never received any of the stolen money. That's going to help. But Pierce, you might want to think about getting a good attorney. Already done. Saturday morning brought reporters. Somehow word had gotten out about the investigation, and by the time I arrived at my shop, there were 3 news vans parked on the street and a handful of people with cameras and microphones waiting by my front door. Mr. Eldro, can you comment on the allegations against your wife? Mr. Eldro, did you know about the embezzlement scheme? Mr. Eldro, are you cooperating with police? I pushed through the crowd without saying anything and locked myself inside the shop. But I could see them through the windows, waiting like vultures for something to happen. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. Meet me at the warehouse on River Road. We need to talk. The warehouse was an abandoned building that used to house a furniture factory. Mason was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car and smoking a cigarette. Hell of a thing, he said when I got out of my truck. Getting worse by the hour. Neera's been busy. She hired Marcus Webb to represent her. Marcus Webb was the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the state. The kind of lawyer you hired when you had serious money and serious problems. Where's she getting the money for Webb? Good question. But Pierce, there's something else you need to know. What now? Webb's been asking questions about you, about your business, your finances, your relationship with me. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest they're planning to claim you were the mastermind behind the whole thing. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That's ridiculous. Maybe. But Webb's good at making ridiculous sound reasonable, and he's got something to work with. Like what? Mason flicked his cigarette into the weeds. Like the fact that you've been planning this confrontation for months. The security cameras, the documentation, the way you handled the bank accounts. Webb's going to say it looks like you set the whole thing up to frame your wife and her boss. That's insane. Is it? Think about it from a jury's perspective. Husband suspects wife is having an affair, installs secret cameras, documents everything, then suddenly discovers embezzlement scheme at exactly the right moment to destroy both his wife and her lover. It's either incredible timing or careful planning. I stared at the abandoned warehouse and tried to process what Mason was telling me. So, what do? You fight back. Hard. And you do it before Webb can get his narrative established. How? Mason smiled, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I saw something dangerous in his expression. By making sure everyone knows the real story. All of it. What do you mean? I mean, it's time to stop playing defense, Pierce. It's time to go on offense. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video file. Remember how I said I'd been watching Rhett for his wife's divorce attorney? Well, I kept watching, even after I gave her the photos. And I caught something interesting yesterday afternoon, right after the police started asking questions. He pressed play, and I watched grainy surveillance footage of Rhett and Neera meeting in the parking lot behind a strip mall. They were arguing about something, gesturing angrily at each other. Then Rhett handed Neera what looked like a thick envelope. What's in the envelope? Cash, probably, or maybe documents. Either way, it's two people who are supposed to be cooperating with a police investigation, having a secret meeting and exchanging something they don't want anyone to see. When was this taken? Yesterday at 4 o'clock, 3 hours after Rhett was suspended, 2 hours after Neera talked to the police. I watched the video again, studying their body language. They looked scared, desperate, like people who were running out of options and running out of time. Mason, I need you to take this to Ray Kowalski. Already done. I sent it to him an hour ago. And he's very interested in having another conversation with your wife and her boyfriend. As if on cue, my phone rang. Ray Kowalski. Pierce, we need to talk. Can you come down to the station? Am I under arrest? No. But there have been some new developments, and I think you're going to want to hear about them. I drove to the police station through streets that seemed different somehow, like the whole town had shifted while I wasn't paying attention. The reporters were gone from my shop, but I had a feeling they'd be back soon enough. Ray met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. Detective Sarah Martinez from Financial Crimes was there, along with a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Assistant District Attorney David Chen. Pierce, Ray said, we arrested your wife and Rhett Vossen about an hour ago. On what charges? Conspiracy to commit embezzlement, fraud, obstruction of justice, and a few other things we're still working on, Chen said. The video your brother provided showed them destroying evidence and attempting to coordinate their stories. What kind of evidence? Laptops, hard drives, financial documents. We recovered most of it from a dumpster behind the strip mall where they met. Detective Martinez opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. We also found something else interesting. The photos showed bank statements for an account I'd never seen before. The account holder was listed as Pierce Eldro. That's not my account, I said immediately. We know, Chen replied. The signatures don't match, and the address is a P.O. box that was rented using a fake ID. But someone wanted us to think it was your account. Someone meaning Nira. That's our working theory. She was planning to claim that you were the one who set up the secret accounts, that you forced her to participate in the embezzlement scheme. I stared at the fake bank statements and felt something shift inside me. For 6 months, I'd been thinking of Nira as someone who'd made bad choices, someone who'd gotten in over her head with the wrong man. But this was different. This was calculated, deliberate, vicious. What happens now? Now we finish building our case, Chen said. And Pierce? You might want to stay close to home for the next few days. This story is going to get a lot bigger before it gets smaller. He was right. By Sunday morning, the story had made the front page of the regional newspaper and the lead story on 3 local television stations. Local architect and boss arrested in embezzlement scheme. Wife frames husband in financial fraud case. Small town rocked by corruption scandal. I stopped reading after the first few articles. The facts were mostly accurate, but the tone was all wrong. They made it sound like a soap opera, like entertainment instead of the destruction of real people's lives. But there was one detail that caught my attention. In every article, in every news report, Nira was described as the victim of manipulation by her older, more powerful boss. Poor young woman, led astray by a predatory male authority figure. Nobody mentioned that she'd tried to frame her husband for crimes he didn't commit. I was thinking about that when my phone rang. Unknown number. Pierce Eldro. Mr. Eldro, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if you'd be willing to sit down for an interview about your wife's arrest. No comment. I understand this must be difficult for you, but the public has a right to know the truth about what happened. The truth? Yes, sir. Your side of the story. I thought about that for a moment. My side of the story. The side where a man worked for 20 years to build a life with someone he loved, only to discover that she'd been planning to destroy him all along. Ms. Walsh, if you want the truth, I suggest you look at the court documents when they become public. Everything you need to know is in there. But surely you must have something to say about... I hung up and turned off my phone. The truth was simple enough. I'd trusted the wrong person, loved the wrong person, built a life with someone who saw me as an obstacle to be removed rather than a partner to be cherished. But the other truth was simpler still. I'd survived. Battered, broke, and alone maybe, but I'd survived. And sometimes, survival is the best revenge of all. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window, illuminating the empty chair where Nira used to sit with her coffee and her architectural magazines. I poured myself a cup and sat down at the table, thinking about what came next. Outside, I could hear the sounds of a town waking up. Cars starting, dogs barking, the distant rumble of the school bus making its rounds, normal sounds, everyday sounds, the sounds of people going about their lives without drama or betrayal or criminal conspiracy. It sounded pretty good to me. I finished my coffee, grabbed my keys, and headed to the shop. Mrs. Henderson's Toyota was waiting for me, and honest work had never seemed more appealing. The rest of the story would have to wait. I had cars to fix,